Today, I'm thrilled to welcome a good friend and a great leader, Joel Stepanek. Joel's made a huge impact over the years, and most recently through the National Eucharistic Congress. I'm really excited to dive into that today. In fact, I love talking to him about any issues of leadership, Jesus, and the church, because I find him incredibly inspiring. And so it's going to be great to have that conversation. And I think a lot of these principles, a lot of his learnings will not only inspire you, but will help you reflect on your leadership so that together we can grow. Joel, welcome to the show.
Ron, it's so good to be with you, man. Good to see you again.
If you haven't seen our last podcast together, I'm going to invite you to go back and watch it. I'll put the link of that to that below as well. So it's going to be a really fun conversation. I would love. My wife and I, Nicole, had a chance to be at the National Eucharistic Congress on that one Saturday with the Diocese of Gary. It was so fun to be there. But what was it like for you?
Yeah, it was that day. I mean, Saturday was an incredible day at the National Eucharistic Congress. We had a Eucharistic procession through the downtown streets of Indianapolis. 60,000 people walked in that procession, and that's an estimate from the city of Indianapolis. They actually have cameras that it's crazy. I mean, they've got cameras that track faces and things like that. Very, very high tech. But they're like, yeah, I mean, we're estimating over 60,000 people walked, which is incredible. So Saturday was a beautiful day. If there was a day to be there, that was the day. But the entire experience over those 5 days, I am just in awe of how the Lord moved. In fact, Ron, I've told several people that I feel almost like the shadow side of this is there's no legitimate reason to doubt God's providence ever again in my life. I just can't complain because it was so clear how the Lord came through in power. And so at the very beginning of the conference, there was a line to get in on Wednesday. Tens of thousands of people lined up, and there was a little bit of an issue with the registration machines that we had. The third party we had contracted with did not send enough machines. They rectified that mistake. They brought a bunch more in, which was incredible. But that afternoon, I mean, the line is just moving slow, and people were in really good spirits. It was like kind of a festival atmosphere. We were passing out water to folks in line, but everybody was really anxious about this thing. And we realized that at the pace we were moving, we are not going to get everybody in the arena. And in fact, by some estimates, we're like, we might not have everybody registered till Saturday. And I had this moment of like, this is awful. Like everything is falling apart. This is going to be a Netflix special someday. This is bad. And I was sitting in the prep room we had. So there was an area backstage where we'd have dinner with the people who were presenting that evening so they could be fed. We could pray together. We could walk through the run of show for the evening sessions and make sure everybody's on the same page. And so I'm sitting in this room waiting for everybody for that Wednesday night session to arrive. And I'm about to have like a panic attack. I'm thinking we've gone through all of the right things. We adjusted our security procedures so they were still safe, but they would allow people to get into the arena who hadn't yet registered. So we knew that people wouldn't miss the first session. That was good. But this problem is just lingering. And I'm like, Lord, I thought you wanted this. If it is in your will to make this happen, like this is the time where you got to show up. And I really perceived the Lord in that moment just saying, you take care of what you need to do, which is this meeting right now. And it's the programming for this session tonight. You take care of that, and I will have this problem solved by 10 a.m. tomorrow. Very specific time. I was like, oh, okay.
Come on.
I'm just going to lean into that. So we had the session. It was beautiful. It was an incredible opening evening. I think there were 45,000 people in the arena for that first night, and everybody dropped to their knees as the Blessed Sacrament came out. There was this moment of silence in Eucharistic adoration in the middle of Lucas Oil Stadium. I mean, absolutely silent. And one of the stage managers who does events for Hillsong United, he does work for that church. They do massive worship events. He does concerts for like Justin Timberlake. That's who he does the stage design for. For Amazon Music, they do like these concerts. So he's involved in all that. He looked at me after the session and said, I have never seen anything like that. Like that was incredible, just profoundly powerful. So very cool moment. Evening ends. I don't sleep that night. There's all kinds of logistics things happening over the night we're trying to work out with flights getting canceled and rerouting people and who's going to pick them up at other airports, just stuff that goes along with a major event. The next morning, I finally just drag myself out of the hotel room after very little or no sleep. And I go down to the registration hall, and everybody's peaceful. They're drinking coffee. It was chaos the day before, Ron, like absolute chaos. And I looked at one of my teammates. I said, well, how are things going? And they're like, I think we're going to be okay. Like, we figured it out. We got these new machines last night. I think everything's going to be fine. And by 8 a.m., we got like the all clear message that was, we're caught up. Everything's going to be fine. We're like set. I was like, wow, Lord, 2 hours early. It was incredible. And I thought, we got these extra machines. That's how it all kind of worked out. The epilogue is that just about a month and a half ago, I found out that the new machines were never set up. So to this day, I'm like, it is nothing short of miraculous that everybody got registered for this conference, because we found out, and somebody was like, yeah, we actually kind of were hesitant to tell you all that, like, those machines never got set up. They just kind of sat there. So there was some reorganization of the registration system for people, but it was miraculous. So again, I have this moment where there's all these little moments like that through the Congress where I'm like, I don't think I can ever like doubt the Lord coming through again.
Boy, that's stress, man. I think I was feeling some anxiety while you're telling the story. That's
It
a
was
lot,
brutal. It was
right? It's not
brutal.
like you're doing a retreat and you got 25 young people coming. This is, 45,000 people from all over US and Canada. Like, we were there.
Yeah. And I think what I've kind of taken away from that, and I think why I've tried to challenge people and continue to challenge myself with this as a church, is that you've got to sometimes do things that are bigger than you. You've got to plan outsized things. And I think that sometimes I've encountered more often sort of this idea of like, okay, we've got to be prudent, and we need to be prudent for sure. We have to be wise in our dealings. But I think sometimes the Lord calls us to things and we're like, no, that wouldn't be prudent. That wouldn't be good.
Right.
When it's like he brings us to sort of the edge, in order, like to the edge of our ability, the edge of our understanding, the edge of our confidence. And then it's like, okay, one more step. We're like, I'm already on the edge. Like, this is already risky. And I think not all the time, and we have to be wise in
Yeah.
discerning it. But it's also, there are times in the church, in our personal lives, in our parishes, where the Lord's like, listen, I need you to take the step all the way to the edge. And then I'm going to ask you for one more step so that I can demonstrate my power in this moment. And I think that sometimes we're a little afraid to do that.
I'd
And
say
when we,
all the times we're a little afraid to do
yeah,
that.
and I think that when that happens, it prevents us from really letting the Lord into some of these moments. I think that's why the Congress was so powerful, is there were a lot of things that we just said, we really feel like this is where we're going. There's a lot of confirmation that comes along the way. Like, we were very
Yes.
attentive to the spiritual reality of things, and where we met resistance, and we'd be like, okay, there's a lot of resistance here. The Lord's blocking this path. But there'd be other things where we're like, that sounds crazy. That's a crazy idea. Like, and then there's just pathways opening up. We're like, okay, I guess the Lord is making a way in the crazy.
How big was your team?
Not as big as most people thought. I think by the time we hit the Congress, we had 15 full-time staff members. So a lot of volunteer help, though, a lot of volunteers, a lot of wonderful people on the ground in Indianapolis. But as far as like our paid staff, when I started in December of 2022, I was the fourth person on staff, or the fifth person on staff.
Right.
And then we grew with a couple people that we brought on just for a year. So there were a couple folks that said, yeah, I'll give a year of my life to this as a full-time employee. But that we knew after the Congress, there'd be some roles that, we wouldn't be able to support organizationally. There were people who came out to do that. But yeah, by the time we hit the beginning of the Congress, we had about 15 full-time staff people, which is just completely undersized for that event.
Yeah. That's David and Goliath right there.
Yeah. And so I've really kind of just been sitting with that of, when we lean into the bigger things that God is calling us to, and like we feel the pathway is opened up and like the door is open, like we kind of have to take that step of, all right, like I'm going to trust that you're going to catch me in this, Lord, because you're calling me out onto the water, and then to step out in faith. And when we do that, big things can happen.
Amen. What were some of the mind shifts that that took place in you. You had a wonderful role with Life Team. Last time we
Mhm.
had the opportunity to speak on the podcast, we're diving into that, which was so much fun. And then going to this project, what are some of the shifts that you had to make?
Yeah, there were I mean it just is so much bigger than the youth ministry and kind of Life Teen world. And Life Teen does incredible work. Youth ministry is one of the most worthy things in the world. Um, it just was a much bigger version, like vision of the church, you know. So there were things that as an apostolate Life Teen could do that were very nimble. Um,
Yeah.
but when you're talking about a big national event, suddenly it's like, okay, if we're going to do this, we've got to make sure we're talking to these people, and we're communicating with this organization and this apostolate. And so things just became broader and bigger. And
Mm.
there was also like a different weight to that. So at Life Teen, I was always very aware of the spiritual burden of resource creation and thinking I'm working with a team to write stuff down and to put out these resources. But then a youth minister is taking those things and implementing them for the spiritual formation of young people. And I'd feel that. I'd be like, that's kind of a big responsibility.
Yeah.
Stepping into this, I'm like, okay, this is not only planning a spiritual moment and trying to be obedient to what God wants from that moment, but it's also representing the bishops who have kind of put their reputation further on the line already and saying,
Yeah.
we're calling for this. We think this is the right thing. We think this is a good thing. And then having them say to our organization, you steward this. So I think there was a mindset shift of like, okay, this is much bigger. Prayer has to look even more fervent, but then also there's just a lot more people to communicate with. And so thinking through communication strategy just became a bigger mindset shift of like, okay, this
Yeah.
decision isn't just, I can't just localize this. I have to consult with the right people and talk with them without letting things get bureaucratic.
Yeah. It's
Which
a
I think was
balance.
the other piece. Yeah, is
Mm.
in big church stuff, sometimes we can get caught up in bureaucracy. So the other
Mm-hmm.
mindset shift that sort of balanced that out and you had to hold intention was, even though you can consult with people, ultimately there's a vision that we were driving towards. And I think Bishop Cousins and Tim Glimkowski, who was the CEO at the time I was hired, was the CEO
Yeah.
through the Congress, was they did a great job of keeping the vision in front of us and saying, no, we can't compromise on this. And so I think this relentless refusal to compromise on the overall vision balanced the pull towards
Yeah.
bureaucracy and like, let's sort
Yeah.
of over decide things,
Getting
and then
lost in the weeds.
yeah, and then just sort of saying, well, let's meet for the sake of meeting. And I think the last piece was just like the idea that you had to, again, you had to lean into stuff and that nothing was going to be perfect. And you just had to do the best you could. So I had numerous conversations with people where I'd say, there's going to be another group perhaps someday that will come through and they'll do the next one. Maybe that's us, maybe that's somebody different, but they'll do the 11th National Eucharistic Congress. And that group can say, this is what they should have done better. This is what they didn't do right. This is what they didn't get. And that's fine. Like, that's fine.
Yeah. It's
We're
normal.
the last time that we did this as a country was 1941. So there's sort of this renewed humility of we're doing the best we can and just being upfront with people to say there are going to be choices we make where we're like, wow, that went way better than we thought it would in spite of ourselves. Choices we
Yep.
make where we can kind of pat ourselves on the back and say, all right, we got that one right. And then other choices that even in hindsight, we're like, yeah, we should have done that differently. And it's fair for somebody to criticize that and to want to do it better.
Mhm.
And that is, again, that I think that's an important mindset shift that I had to undertake in order to actually get work done. Otherwise, it would just be paralyzing because you would be constantly worried about, is this the right thing? And there's so many voices speaking into everything. Um,
Right. Everybody has an opinion.
Everybody has an opinion, and you kind of have to say,
Mhm.
okay, in this, who is the Pharisee and who is the prophet? And I think that that was one of the other distinctions I had to start to make, is like, not every voice is the Pharisee. Like, I'm just here to challenge you and to criticize and to be,
Yes.
angsty because I've got, your opinion of this differs than mine. Sometimes you have a prophetic voice that the Lord is sending to kind of chirp at you. And so I think we mistake those things. And that was another piece that I had to recognize, is like, we get defensive and we're like, everybody's against me and I'm the prophet, right?
Yeah.
Um,
I'm right. Everybody else is
I'm
wrong.
the run. Everybody, everybody else is
Yep.
wrong. And then other times we can be so what we think is pastoral that we're like, well, I've got to listen to every voice and incorporate everybody's opinion and every idea. And it all has to like, everything is just compromise. So,
Mm,
and it can't be. Not for something like this, there have to be things that we don't compromise on.
mm. Yeah, that's a beautiful tension. I think that applies to everybody who's listening, whether you're running a church, a diocese, or a ministry. That exact same principle applies. That's really helpful.
Yeah.
Uh,
And it's just being
mm,
bold. I think in the church, we don't want to upset anyone, but that's why having the vision is so key. Is you
mm,
say we serve the mission and the vision of this because it's given by God, so we've got to be faithful to that. Um, and so we can listen and we can consider, but we have to be willing to have conversations. I think especially in a leadership role where we look at someone and say, "Thank you so much for that idea. It just doesn't fit. We're not going to go that
right,
direction." And then sometimes the people in the church are sort of used to like, well, wait a second, everybody's idea gets heard. It does, but not every idea gets implemented, especially if it
right.
would be impactful of the integrity of what the mission and the vision is here. And if we don't if we don't compromise on some of those big pieces,
Mm,
something beautiful can happen. And it doesn't mean like we don't listen, but I think we're just so afraid to tell people, no, we're not going to go that
yeah.
direction, that we end up creating this really weird caricature of the stuff we want to do rather than the
Mm,
ultimate fulfillment of what it is we're called to do.
amen. And that's interesting, because to your point, yeah, you have a vision, and the clearer you are in your vision, the easier it is for your yes to be a yes and your no to be a no. But the other thing that you are dealing with, which again, I think we can all relate to, is you only have a limited amount of resources. And so things aren't endless. Like good
Mhm.
ideas can actually bring us down. Like we only have so much energy to execute on the things that are most critical to the mission. And it doesn't mean that the other ideas aren't good. It just means we're not going to do them.
Yeah. And having that attitude around the team too, and even in like leadership levels, one of the things I appreciated about Bishop Cousins is that there would be
Mhm,
times that as we were moving through the project process, we'd be late we'd be past the ideation phase,
mhm.
and we'd be into, okay, like we're getting everybody moving, we're implementing. And Bishop Cousins is a visionary, and he'd say, "What about this idea? I had this great," and they would be great ideas. But
Yeah.
we as followers had to be comfortable saying, "Bishop, that's a great idea for
Yeah.
the 11th National Eucharistic Congress," or "That's a great idea for another time," or "We're not going to have the space to do that." And then
Yeah.
as a leader, he was so humble that he'd be like, "Okay," and he trusted the team to be able to give him feedback, that we weren't angsty or cynical or just saying, no, we don't want to do it because we're lazy and we don't want to put the time into it, but that we
Right.
were giving him an accurate read of like what could and couldn't be done. And sometimes we would
Mm,
present him with choices and say, we could do that. If we do that, it means X, Y, and Z.
right.
But that was a very healthy dynamic. And I think a lot of teams
Mhm.
wrestle with that dynamic of the leader being the leader trusting the team enough to take the feedback and say, okay, if you're telling me no, or this isn't a good idea, I'm going to trust you on that. And if I really feel like I need to push, I'll push. And then
Right.
the team being comfortable enough to say to a leader, hey, I don't think this is a good idea. Um, and walk through that with them.
Yeah. I have a team like that, and I'm so grateful. They push back on me all the time. I love it. It's just such a healthy dynamic, and I don't know what percentage I'm right, but I'm guessing it's not particularly high. And together, because we have the same vision in mind, we have the same
Yeah.
heart, we have the same vision, and we have incredible mutual respect. And so the way we can go at things is so healthy. And I never think of myself as the boss when I'm in those meetings and we're having
Mhm.
those conversations. I'm one of the team who wants to get from here to there and willing to do whatever it takes, but so are they. And just because I found the ministry doesn't mean that they're any less committed than I am. So it's really fun dynamic when you have that level of trust and that shared vision and that mutual respect where you can hammer things out and push back. And sometimes we can be testy with one another if we didn't eat
Mhm.
properly or have a good sleep.
Yep.
We can each other and oversee those times and moments when that happens because we love each other. And and sounds like that was part of the dynamic of Bishop Cousins and Tim and yourself and the team.
Yeah, it was. I think being united in that vision and mission is such a critical piece. And I think that the timeline we were on forced adherence to it. Like we all kind of realized early on, there's just no time for a lot of the distractions that can come up in a team. So I felt like we had a very healthy team dynamic, which was largely driven by this unification of a real clear vision and mission, focused by this one point in time that just did not allow for the superfluous things that teams can get caught up on, that drag them down.
It's a good point. Sometimes we do need an event to elevate us above the nitty gritty of things we can disagree on. I remember when I was at St. Benedict Parish, the book Divine Renovation came out and people started calling, and we decided we're going to host an event. And it was fit 600 people in our church. We didn't expect anybody to come, mind you. But that preparing for that event was so fun with the team, because all of a sudden we're writing the workshops, and we had deadlines for things, and we were listening to each other, and we're giving feedback. So we wanted them to be amazing. And it just elevated us all to a project. We still had to get the day-to-day stuff done that normal churches have to do. But that rally cry, that event really brought us together in ways that, I think we probably blessed a few people in the process who came, but it was certainly a blessing to us as well to work differently as a team, like having a new project to work on that was bigger than us. Yeah, even as small as it was bigger than us, and it was a neat experience.
Yeah. Well, and I'm thinking too, as we're talking about it, the benefit to those types of things, and it doesn't just have to be events, but events are unique because the risk of public failure and the ripple effect of it is so great that it does to us what really we should be doing for any project or anything. Is it allows us to say, hang on, is this actually necessary right now? There were lots of times that as a team we would say, well, hang on, this is not the most important thing right now. Or in our daily schedules, we'd say, this isn't the most important thing right now. I'm going to push it. Or if there are day-to-day tasks we have to do, suddenly the pressure breeds a creativity of, how do I automate that task? How do I do this in 30 minutes when maybe I might take like 60 minutes to do it just because I can? Or even the little extra things of, I need a mental break, so I'm going to thumb through my phone. Well, that's not really a mental break. It becomes like, I need a mental break, so I'm going to get up and take a walk because that makes me more alert. The ripple effect of that focus is really profound. But I think what happens, at least for me, I guess this is another mindset shift, is I'm trying to find ways to force myself into that now more, because it was so beneficial. But oftentimes what we do to ourselves and what we do with others is we don't have that same level of accountability. The benefit to a big event, whether it's Divine Renovation at a parish, whether it's the 10th National Eucharistic Congress, is like, if this doesn't get done and doesn't get done well, there's ripple effects. This affects hundreds, thousands of people. The perception is of public failure. It's stressful the day during the event if you don't have everything set. And so there's this real strong, just objective accountability. I guess I'll call it that. Whereas in teams, sometimes we have a more subjective accountability to ourselves, where we're like, I'm going to give myself a little bit of grace, or I'm going to give somebody else a little bit of grace. And that doesn't mean that we can't do that, but that subtly destroys focus. And it's difficult because that type of objective accountability requires uncomfortable conversations with people to say, hey, you missed a deadline. And now it's having a ripple effect on people. Or I'm going to have just a strict accountability of myself of, I'm not going to be, I can't spend 65 minutes doing email because I can kind of take it at a leisurely pace. Like, I have a 30-minute block, and if I don't get stuff done in that 30-minute block, I've got to move on to the next thing. If we could grab that kind of focus, we would do so much more in the right bucket. So I'm trying to figure out how to manufacture that for myself now, because it's different without a major public event.
Yeah, that's a good learning. That's a really good learning and a great discipline. And it's probably one too, if there are listeners listening to that right now going, yeah, I love that. Love it with somebody else. Like if you had an accountability partner in your team, that's really going to be helpful, even to come up with some competitive ways to hold yourself accountable to what you're trying to accomplish and share it with somebody. It's really fun because it's hard to stay that focused by yourself
Hmm.
necessarily. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a great idea. Listen, one of the things, Joel, that I really wanted to talk to you about as well is again, being there for the Congress, it was an event for us. We loved it, but it's not an event for you guys. It's bigger than that. And so what's next? How does that kind of get unpacked? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Bishop Cousins early on had said that the National Eucharistic Revival is not a program or an event, it's a movement. And so
Mm,
when we talk about it being an initiative initiates something. It's not, we too often think we're like, oh, that's an initiative. And we think an initiative has a beginning and an end. But the definition of an initiative is to prompt the start of something new. That continues. And so the National Eucharistic Revival is a movement, and our goal is to continue the fruit, cultivating the fruit of what has happened over the last 3 years of the National Eucharistic Revival, which is, you know, fruit at the diocesan level, a parish level, an individual level, and to call people forward to really embody the National Eucharistic Revival as Eucharistic missionaries. So our hope is that people would, at the end of the formal initiative, the initialization of the movement of the National Eucharistic Revival, which happens on June 22nd, that's
okay.
the solemnity of the most holy body and blood of Jesus Christ, Corpus Christi, that people would make a commitment to live as a Eucharistic missionary in their family, their neighborhood, and their parish. Very simple ask. And that our work will really focus around how we continue to empower those individuals to do that grassroots work. And so there's a series of commitments a person would make to spending an hour a week in Eucharistic adoration. Very simple, but what's simple isn't always easy. To attending an additional daily Mass in addition to their Sunday obligation, and praying at that Mass for the ongoing Eucharistic revival in our world. Committing to service at their parish, in their community, going out to those on the peripheries, being present to them, and then walking with one other person, picking one person that they walk with, and being present to them in their journey of faith, and then praying and fasting for that person. So very simple things that somebody would commit to over the course of a year, and in doing so would live the ongoing movement of the National Eucharistic Revival, which is, I am healed, I am converted, I'm formed by the Eucharist, and then I go out and I bring people to that same experience of healing, of conversion, of being formed, so that they can go out. And that this is actually a very simple grassroots movement to ongoing Eucharistic revival. It's not just programs or events, it's lived in the hearts of individuals. And we really keep highlighting those three places because they're places where we have the gift of proximity: our family, our neighborhood. And when I say neighborhood, I mean like your neighbors, the people in the houses around you, and your
Right.
parish. For a lot of us, we don't even know our neighbors' names. Some of us do, but do we know the people who live in our neighborhood? Do we know a
Right.
little bit of their story? What about people at your parish? Even more convicting, we probably sit in the same section of pews every single Sunday. Do you know who sits around you? I was at a parish recently and we were having a conversation about some challenges they were experiencing. And they said, so many people left during COVID and they just haven't come back. And I said, well, who are they? And they were kind of like, well, what do you mean? I said, who? Like, could you give me a list of like these?
Uh,
And this was not a super huge parish. It was a smaller rural
yeah.
parish. And that question alone was kind of like, oh, again, so that's one of the challenges we face is it's not that your staff needs to know everybody, but it's that people ultimately just kind of feel disconnected. And so my parish team doesn't need to know everybody, but if we could get the people in the pews to know one another, where I could survey my parish and say, okay, like who's missing? Um, I could get a list of, yeah, these are the people who haven't come back or haven't been here in a few weeks.
Yeah.
Um, but we don't know. And I'm like, well, there's the answer. If I'm disconnected from something, then I'm just a consumer of it. I'm not a contributor to community. I'm a consumer of it. And as a consumer, I can take my choices elsewhere. But if I'm a contributor and I have an active engagement in the community, informing it and being a part of it,
Right.
well, now that becomes more of my thing. And I think that that's a real powerful challenge we're issuing too to Eucharistic missionaries, is like, your pastor is not the sole, he's not the person who's solely responsible for the formation of community. In fact, I'd argue he's not at all responsible for that. You are. Like, that's the
Yeah.
job of the laity. Like, I heard
Yeah.
a story of a priest friend of mine. He said there were families that were gathering out, and they had a nice gathering space at their church. And every Sunday he saw these same Catholic families, and they'd hang out after church, and their kids would kind of run around and play. Um, and one Sunday he went up to him and said, like, "Are you guys? You're always here. Are you friends? Like, outside of church?" And they're like, "Oh no, we see each other in church every Sunday." And he was like, "Get out! I'm kicking you out of the gathering space. Go get brunch with one another. Go to each other's house. Be friends outside of church." Um,
Mm.
because they were just church friends. And his point
Yeah.
was, this is so cool. Go be friends outside of church. Build community in your parish outside of church. So that's sort of the target of how we're moving forward
Mhm.
in asking people to be Eucharistic missionaries, is lean into the places where you have the gift of proximity. You don't have to go out and do anything crazy, but live your faith and walk with the people closest to you. And
Yeah.
that's a significant part of how we plan to carry the spirit and the movement of the Eucharistic revival forward, and then to provide opportunities, local events, looking ahead to hopefully a National Eucharistic Congress in the near future, and being able to bring this community of people together at different points regionally and then hopefully nationally, again,
Mm.
to be empowered, formed, healed, converted, and sent.
Beautiful. Beautiful. It was neat being there. I took the opportunity when I was standing in line for getting lunch or going through the displays, and when I got a chance to talk to people, and I asked each person, I introduced myself, and can be outgoing and connect, and I'd say, "Tell me a little bit about your parish," and they were always happy to tell me about your parish. And I'd say, "Hey, what does your parish do for evangelization?" And the answer to all of them was 0.
Mm,
And I thought, fair, like it surprised me a little bit, but maybe not a ton, but it did break my heart.
yeah.
And I'm thinking, um, how, because we're a perfect example, even what you're talking about, Joel. We're at a parish in the just last couple of years, and it hasn't been easy to really connect in any meaningful way. We go to church, we wave at people, they're
Hmm.
parishioners, we wave, everybody's friendly and nice. I don't know them, they don't know me, and it feels incredibly lonely. It's been a while since I've been in that situation, um, because I try to make that not happen whenever I go. And so we finally started Alpha in our home, and then that's going to branch out to 4 home Alphas plus a daytime Alpha.
Yeah.
And everybody said the same thing. Like, we've been going to church with these people for the last 30 years, and we knew them, who they were, but we didn't know them. And in
Hmm.
12 weeks, now they're really good friends. And that's the magic. And I think that's what you're getting at, is this: can we know each other's stories? Can we go from parishioners to friends and from friends to family? Because we're supposed to be a family of faith. But
Hmm.
most people's experience of church is people doesn't feel like they actually give a rip, but they're really nice people. We're not good at facilitating fellowship, eh?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that's, again, when we talk about evangelization,
Mm.
it's such a key part to that, because if I have this experience of church that's good and of a good community,
Mm.
I will want to pull other people outside of church into that.
Yes.
If because again, if the church is just a product, well, then
Hmm.
maybe you don't prefer that product. I don't
Right.
care what, macaroni and cheese you eat. I don't care what pizza place you like. Maybe I'll argue with you about it, like, oh, this pizza place is
Yeah.
better than this one. But at the end of the day, I don't care. That's your preference. And even when we ask, like, what's your religious preference, on surveys, but it's when we have that attitude, well, yeah, why would I
Mm.
enter into the uncomfortable conversation of faith with somebody when it's really just a product I'm consuming anyway? And that's what I like, and you might like
Right.
something different. If it becomes, and then on the flip side, other people are like, well, I don't want to like evangelize because, gosh, it's so deeply personal. And I'm not equipped. I don't know all the theological questions. I don't know how to walk with somebody. But if my church is a community that I like and I enjoy and feeds me, we as people want to invite others into that community. Well, I have this cool space. Wouldn't it be cool if these other people I knew were a part of that, or if I could bring them into that? It's a little bit easier to invite people into something that is joyful, that's connected. But oftentimes we go to mass like it's a sporting event. In fact, we have more interaction probably with other fans at a sporting event than we do at mass,
That's a good point. We'll high
because I'm
five
just,
the guy
I'm there.
beside us.
I was at a Packer Cardinal game with my son years ago, and the Packers won last minute. They got an interception in the end zone, and it was, there were Packer fans everywhere in Arizona too, which is kind of, if you're an Arizona Cardinal fan, it's kind of a sad thing. But there was a guy who had been standing next to us the whole game, I think by himself. I think he had one ticket. He was there, and like we're hugging and high fiving, and I mean, I get to the sign of peace at mass, and sometimes I'm like, yeah, I'll just give you one of these, across the way. I'm not even shaking hands with some of these people. Um,
So true.
yeah. So I think there's an opportunity there. And if we
Yeah.
make the core of the parish strong and inviting, it allows evangelization programs to be that much more effective, because we're proud to bring people into something. We see the value of it.
It's a beautiful challenge. I love that concept of initiative and a movement, and really trying to find actionable steps to invite people into to really make it a way of life. And so it's beautiful. How else has, or maybe, even how else has your personal ministry kind of evolved? Tell me a little bit about that, because again, my experience of you and leadership is, I'd follow you, and I'd be.
I am grateful for that compliment. I received that, and praise God. Thank you. I have, since I've worked at Life Teen, I think being at Life Teen and seeing parish youth ministries, I've just developed a real passion for how we help parishes, dioceses, apostolates, nonprofits, even mission driven for profit organizations, like organizations with a mission that matter, but especially church organizations, um, be the best they can be. And at Life Teen, I realized that there were so many churches where youth ministry would be great. They'd have like a great youth minister, a really good vision for it, but the ecosystem that it was in just wasn't good. Like you were saying, it's not a mission driven organization. They don't have a plan for evangelization. And I'd hear stories of the youth minister just really constantly going against the grain and struggling, and then eventually kind of burning out. I'd hear stories from teenagers about the movement from a youth program into regular parish life, and they'd be saying, gosh, like it just is so different, because there was an intentionality, a quality, a reverence, a passion for the faith over here, but then I get into parish life and it's just not present. To the point, I had one seminarian, as he was driving me to an event years ago, tell me that youth ministry was harming the church because it was creating unrealistic expectations for young adults of what the church ought to be. And basically, he was saying you've got to kind of nerf youth ministry in order to lower everybody's expectations. And
Because we
I'm
can't.
just
Yeah.
like, and I'm like, gosh, that's the opposite of what we should be doing. So I want to help parishes, school systems, dioceses just get clear on who they are internally, on what they value, on how they strategically implement, initiatives, movements, programs, so that the core of the parish can be strong and Eucharistic centered. And if you do that, suddenly everything starts to become a little bit more successful, more fun. Conflict diminishes when you are clear on who we are, how we do things, where we're going. So much of conflict in a staff comes from, I don't understand where we're going, so I'm going to decide where I'm going. I don't
Yeah.
understand how we all behave, so I'm going to default to my personal values, which may be different from yours. And now we're going to be in conflict because what I think is important, you don't think is important, and comes from a lack of strategy and systems. I don't know how to
Right.
do things in a way that works with everybody, so I just make up my own way and try to get everyone to fit into that. But if you can bring those things to alignment, conflict diminishes, and then we can really focus on, you know, where are we trying to get to, and then, as we've talked about, letting the other stuff go so that we can be successful. Parishes have limited resources, nonprofits have limited resources. So you got to be clear on that. I'm working with one school district it's a Catholic school system, and it's been so fun to work with them because they're really like they're just saying this is who we are, and they're taking steps already to just say, okay, we have to lean into this vision and mission. And similar to some of the stuff we've talked about, they're saying we have to be going somewhere, and there are going to be people who disagree, and that's okay. But this is the direction we're picking, and picking the direction is like 95% of the battle. So that's what I've been leaning into and helping create the soil, or kind of till the soil from which a parish grows ministries. I think that that's so crucial, and wherever I can go to make that impact, I am happy to do that.
That's beautiful. Are you doing that through the organization of the National Eucharistic Ministry? Is that something you're doing in conjunction with? Tell me about that.
Yeah, so that's something I do just kind of as an individual. So
Gotcha.
right now it's very simple. The Eucharistic Congress is focused on this grassroots initiative of Eucharistic missionaries and individuals, and working for ongoing parish revival within the Eucharist. And I am blessed to be able to come in kind of as a supplement to parishes or dioceses and work with them individually on some broader picture things as it relates to strategy, culture, vision, mission, those kinds of things. I think you're probably very similar. I'd like to help people reclaim those words, because for many people, they're like, oh, okay, that's just like fluffy stuff. To the point, I had one particular session where we're doing a strategic planning, and this older priest, walked in the room who everybody knew. Apparently I don't think he was at the parish at one point, and he was back to visit, and he really kind of disrupted the session, but I'm like, okay, he apparently has some clout, we'll let it go. And he's like, what are you guys doing? Very, very, boisterous personality. What are you guys working on? And Pastor, we're doing some strategic planning. And he showed him the system we were using and how we were setting that up. He goes, oh, I used to do that stuff, all that garbage, mission and values and strategy. And then I heard this quote: culture eats strategy for breakfast, which a lot of people have heard. I mean, we've all heard that quote: culture eats strategy for breakfast. And typically when we hear it, we think, oh, I've really got to culture is important. I've got to do something about that. But then he goes, and I realized, what's the point? It's just not going to matter anyway, because culture eats strategy for breakfast. So he heard that quote and basically was like, oh, there's no way to beat the culture. So what's the point in having a strategy? And I was like, at least you're consistent. I mean, I've never heard somebody hear that quote and then say, well, it just doesn't matter then. So let's just kind of throw it all away. But that was his take on it, which I thought was so interesting. But I think a lot of pastors, especially, are kind of burnt out on those words or strategic planning, because they don't know what those things mean. And for a lot of them, it's just sort of something nice we put on a wall. But I'm like, these are lenses that focus us in order to be successful at whatever God has uniquely called you to do, and give us the confidence to step out onto the edge to the bold and scary things, because one, we trust in the Lord, and two, we believe our team is ready to handle it.
Amen. There's another part to that quote that I heard quite some time ago, and I just thought it was so cool. If culture eats strategy for breakfast, leadership eats culture for lunch. And so if you have a problem with your culture, that's awesome. Welcome to the club.
Yeah.
Lead intentionally, and guess what you'll do? You'll change the darn culture, and then your strategies might equal fruit at some point in time. But if you don't learn how to lead, my gosh, you're going to continue to be borderline useless. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Anyway, his response to that is so disheartening.
Well, I'm like, at least you're consistent. I mean, you said there's no point, and so and that is one way to approach things. And I think a lot of people do, is they just say, gosh, there's so much going on. We treat the symptoms. Let's just sort of, everybody can do their own thing, and then when conflict arises, we'll try to pacify it. When things don't work out well, we'll kind of ignore it. If stuff happens, oh, happy fault, we did it. But there's just a better way of doing things. And again, I think that my work with the National Eucharistic Congress has really solidified that, and saying there is a better way to do things. And if we can lean into that, gosh, the Lord could really move and do some incredible things with us.
Amen. Amen. It's so fun talking to you about stuff, Joel, because you're so passionate about it. You're clearly a student of leadership. You live it, and you help help others with it. If people wanted to get in touch with you and thinking, hey, that guy's got some spare time, I wouldn't mind having him come out or talk to him or connect with him or hire him. How would people do that?
Yeah, you can find, if you go to chasinghumility.com, it'll give you a little link tree for some things for me.
Okay.
So that's where you can find some information about me, chasinghumility.com, or you can find out all about the National Eucharistic Congress and Revival at National Eucharistic Revival, or just eucharisticrevival.org.
Beautiful. Joel, thank you for your honesty, your leadership, and your willingness to lean into mission, even when the stakes are high and
Yeah.
the work is hard. I find it really inspiring, like what you've been doing and the leap that you took. You did go to the edge and then you took another step. Thanks for sharing that with us.
Yeah, it's been great. Good to see you again, Ron.
Yeah, it's good to see you too. And for all of you that are listening, thanks for coming along this journey with us at Huntley Leadership. We just love having these conversations to inspire you to keep doing what you're doing, to answer the call to lead, to make your parish, your family, and your community a place of impact. So God bless you, and we'll see you next time.
I want to encourage you, as you lead this week, be faithful to God and generous to others. See you next time, and remember, if you're still breathing, you are powered for impact.